so he can moderate and walk you through what we're trying to accomplish. But first, I want to recognize two esteemed people here with us this morning. I appreciate their attendance. Mayor Rajero, Mayor Burchett, thank you for being here. Would either of you like to make a couple of comments to kick this off? I'm glad to let that happen here, if you would. I think he's deferring to you, Mayor Burchett.
You go ahead. I'm writing my notes.
Oh, okay. She's fast. She's doing her speech while she's sitting here.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I just, I know I can't speak for the city, I can speak for the county, but Mayor O'Hara and I both had this conversation. We're in this. We appreciate the business community. It's going to take the business community also. Low fare, airfare is incredibly important to our business community. It's important to the city and the county. I just want to thank you all so much for being here. I thank the chamber, Mitch, everybody. Appreciate y'all helping us with this. Thank you.
Good morning. I just want to echo what Mayor Burchett said. Air travel is incredibly important to all of us, both I'm right now trying to book a flight to the city. Very expensive. So it's important both to government, to business, and to the individuals that live here and travel for leisure as well. So we are committed to working with the airport authority, with the chamber, with the business community, and with the other governments in this area to try and do something about it. We know that it's not an easy thing to solve or would have been solved before, but we know it's incredibly important. We are going to do our part in it, and we really look forward to working with you all as partners and making sure that all of us have better and less expensive airfare, more competitive airfare. Thank you.
Dave, I'll just go ahead and turn it over to you. We'll just keep it rolling. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Like the mayor said, we're very glad to have you all here this morning, and got a presentation for you that I think you'll find enlightening. For several of the people in here, both Mayor Burchett, Mayor Rajero, and others, this will be your second or third time. We appreciate your being back here to see you again.
It takes us a few times to really understand.
A lot of things have changed in the world of aviation in the last couple of years, and I will see as we go through this presentation why it's very timely to be doing what we're doing right now with the Competitive Airfare Program. When we look at the formation of all of this, one of the first things we want to do is get a good mission statement. I won't go through all of it, except that we want to get a good service that helps in economic development and building the community. But the last paragraph, sustainable, and that's a key word, sustainable low-fare air service for one or more airlines that will provide us with the cities that we need and meet the demands of the region so that you can travel, your people can travel with lower fares and be more effective in what they do. There are, as I mentioned, a lot of things changing in the landscape of aviation. There's recent decisions that we're going to lead in a minute that have occurred in other cities that are very much of interest to us. We'll look at some of the data that compares Knoxville to these other cities. Building really indicates why it's time to do this. We'll look at the fact that Knoxville has always been a good city in responding to any low-fare service that we've had, and touch a little bit on tourism. The biggest change that we've seen in the last couple of years is over in Greenville, Spartanburg, and Charleston. Southwest went into those two cities back in March of 2011, so they've been in a little more than 2 years. So we have some pretty good data to look at when we see peer cities to Knoxville. That's an important thing when we say peer cities. JetBlue came into Charleston in February of this year, so they got Southwest, and 2 years later they now have JetBlue. When we say peer group, if you look at these numbers, Knoxville, Charleston, and Greenville, the passengers, and this is after they had Southwest in their market. This is through the fourth quarter of 2011 to the third quarter of 2012. You can see Knoxville is a little bit behind Greenville, Spartanburg. Charleston is widening the gap that they've had over both of us during that time. Yet our one-way fare, as you see there, is higher than both of theirs. These are more telling numbers, I think, than the one you just saw. If you look at 2010, Knoxville, and these are domestic passengers, 1,381,000 passengers, and look at Greenville, 1,100,000. So back then, we were actually a little bit larger than Greenville-Spartanburg. Charleston was larger than us at that time, but not dramatically larger than us. So then, with Southwest in 2011, you can see that Knoxville continued to grow, 1,004,000. But look at the growth in Charleston, roughly 26% growth and 40% in Greenville-Spartanburg, and Greenville was a little bit ahead of us. And then in 2012, and this is only 3/4 of data, we don't have all of 2012 yet, Knoxville did 1,000,001. But look at Greenville, we're just about where they are. And they continue to grow. Both Charleston and Greenville continue to grow. But it puts us very much in the same size category that they are. So now let's look at the cities and see what's alike and different that drives that. The Knoxville population is virtually the same as Greenville-Spartanburg, and about 300,000 citizens ahead of Charleston. And the tourism impact here is far greater than either of those two markets. Another aspect that airlines want to know is what's your median household income? And as you can see, we're at 47,000, a little bit behind Charleston, a little bit ahead of Greenville-Spartanburg, so again, we compare very favorably. Then we wanted to look at population growth. How's Knoxville and Knoxville region doing? And you can see that we've gone from 819,000 to the U.S. Department of Census estimate of 940,000 for this year. So that's growth from Knoxville, 13%. The U.S. average growth was 9%. And then from 2000 to 2012, Knoxville, with Sevier County, is up 15%, above the U.S. total of 11%. So if you break that down, we're running about 36% ahead of the nation in population growth, which is certainly a strong factor for producing additional passengers. Then we took a look at another factor that Mitch mentioned when he saw the presentation. We wanted to look at the gross metro product, the GDP, basically, of this region. And you can see in billions of dollars, Knoxville area, $31 billion in gross metro product. That's about $6 billion above Greenville-Spartanburg, about $4 billion ahead of Charleston. And then we're on when we hit 2011, and it's still, we continue to grow. Charleston grew a little bit. Greenville had a little bit bigger growth. I think we know they landed some fairly large corporate home offices and other industrial growth up there. Unemployment here is also better than they are. We're down at 6.6, they're both at 7.5. So that paints a very healthy picture. We're growing, our economy's good, and we've got a huge gross metro product. Won't dwell too long on this, but we took a look at available seats in the Knoxville market during this time to see why are we so constrained. I know when you're trying to book a flight, a lot of times they're sold out, or only the highest fares are available. Part of that is, as you can see, we've lost, if you take Allegiant out of the equation, it's a unique niche low-fare carrier. Go over to the right side, and you can see that we dropped 782,000 seats between 2012 versus 2000, and that is a drop of 30% in our seats. We did have a reduction in passengers during that time, but only 11%. So that's part of the constraint, that we face and why it's important that we grow the market. So what does that mean to you? Well, with high load factors in excess of 85%, that means a lot of times when your people need to travel, it's hard to get the flights they want when they want or a good fare. So the seats not being available, obviously, lower supply, high demand, you're going to get higher fares. And it also adds to our diversion of passengers to other markets. We mentioned the fact that Knoxville has always done well with low-fare carriers coming in. Back in '99, it was the first real experience with that when AirTran came in. And the all-time record at that point was 1,007,000 passengers for that year. We grew at 8.4%. The national growth was 4%, so Knoxville was growing twice as fast. And if you put 98, 99 together, 1998. It was up 22%. A few years later, Independence Air was formed and came to Knoxville and did very, very well here. Unfortunately, they had a bad business model and they went out of business. It wasn't anything to Knoxville. We were one of the bright spots. And set a new record of $1.8 million for that year and grew almost 15% versus the local 5 nationally. So you can see that it was a healthy response. And then Allegiant, which is a niche carrier, in 2007, helped bring the numbers back up overall to over 1.8 million, and the increase there was almost 9 versus 3 nationally. So you can see significant results when you get a low-fare carrier in the market. What are the tangible benefits for you? First, cost of travel reduced, and we're competitive with other markets. It certainly made assistance in economic development. And if you look at just a hard dollar example, saving in time, if you had to go to Nashville, let's say, to get a lower fare, you're saving 5 to 6 hours of round-trip driving time. Fuel savings is 325 miles. If you figure 25 miles a gallon, it's 13 gallons. Hopefully that's a pilot price fish if you got up in the day. $3 a gallon. So $39 in gas, but I think many of you work on the TVA, I don't know what the federal, I think it's about 55 cents a mile for travel. And so that was laid out $178 in addition to expense. Also, we checked our parking ratio lower than some of the other airports that we compete with, and it certainly helps to increase our tourism potential. So you can see some of the very tangible benefits. Then let Doug come up and talk a little bit about the fundraising goal that we have and where we are and where we'll be going.
Yeah, so let me step back for a second. One of the things that I think is important is this is kind of a three-pronged approach that we're talking about to get to this goal of $3 million for funds to assist with this effort. Kind of the first phase was we started talking and having conversations with the public sector. As you know, the city of Knoxville and Knox County are both into this initiative. We've had conversations with several of the other regional surrounding mayors, including Blount County and Anderson County, City of Oak Ridge as well. And all are expressing support. Some are a little bit further along in being able to actually put dollars into the bucket, so to speak, to join Knoxville and Knox County. But we're hopeful that those will continue to go. The second prong of this approach is today, sitting here starting the conversation with the private sector. And it's also important to note that coming up later on this week, actually, we're going to start having conversations with the regional tourism folks. So Visit Knoxville has been a great partner of this. In fact, they are putting funds from their hotel-motel tourism tax dollars that are going to be going into this initiative as well. So we're talking to the Pigeon Forge and Sevierville and the regional tourism councils, as well as some of the big tourist attractions of the region, like the Bristol Motor Speedways and Dollywood and Wilderness and the Smokies and some of those folks. We spent a lot of time looking at other regions around the country, and we keep talking about Greenville and Charleston because they were successful. They came together with their chambers, with their public sector, with their tourism sector, and with the private sector, and put together an initiative just like this, like we're talking about with CAP, the Competitive Airfare Partnership. So that's just kind of a little bit of background on how we got to this point today. So the goal is $3 million. Today we're sitting at about 1.2 with some public sector, with tourism, with some grants that are out there. That is where we stand. And what's important to note is, these funds are not dispersed until we've actually got an agreement with a particular airline or airlines that say you're going to provide a service for a certain amount of time. And really, what we're talking about is marketing support. We're not talking about revenue guarantees. We're talking about taking dollars and supporting, raising the awareness. We think if a new low-fare carrier comes to Knoxville, this market will get it, that there'll be such a splash. But what we're talking about is if they serve Chicago, Houston, whatever cities, going into those markets to bring those folks here. We all benefit locally by the low-fare service coming here. In the private sector, and average citizens will save money because of the low-fare service. But the tourism angle, to bring those folks from other parts of the region that are coming here, a lot, honestly, are coming, they will talk later, by car. Put a few of those bodies on planes, and that really is a powerful message to potential airlines. million, we're talking about cash, we're talking about grants. The airport's got things they can do for all airlines to help incentivize new air service at McGee-Tyson, co-op advertising opportunities, which we're talking about with the tourism sector later on this week. So that's just a quick snapshot of what we'd be using these dollars for. There we go. So we have got like I said, we've talked to the public sector. We've got a list now of about 100 of the largest corporate private sector companies in the region that we know are doing a lot of air travel. So like I said, this is the start of that conversation. We'll be reaching out to the private sector a lot more. We've looked at the other cities' best practices. This type of initiative is done a lot. Regions come together a lot to work on lowering the cost of airfare. And then Innovation Valley, that's our regional economic development initiative. That is an initiative that's led by the Knoxville Chamber, where we're sitting here today. We are a 501c6. In Innovation Valley, what we do is this is new business recruitment, this is existing industry expansion services, this is workforce development, it's public policy, it's entrepreneur, startup support assistance. All of those things are in our bucket that we call Innovation Valley Services. This is an initiative of Innovation Valley, but these dollars that we raise will go into a separate restricted account specifically for this low airfare initiative. And we're in the process of trying to structure an advisory committee of folks to help us to analyze potential deals that come down the pike and say, hey, yeah, this is a good use for these restricted funds, or no, we have to think about doing something else, or maybe we'll look for the right project to come along. So.
Clark mentioned that it could be an airline or airlines, and there are 5 main low-fare carriers that we would consider to fill the type of service we would like to get. Obviously, Southwest is on that list. We can call them the people's choice. Very strong financially. Don't have to say too much about them. I think they're extremely well known. JetBlue also very strong financially. More related to the East Coast, North and South, although they do go into markets on the West Coast, and they're expanding. AirTran, they were here back in '98, but it's a totally different airline today than it was then, and they've been acquired by Southwest, and it won't be too long before we'll take them off because they will become part of Southwest. Spirit, another good low-fare carrier. They operate a lot on the East Coast and into Florida, some international in the Caribbean. And then Frontier, who's currently here, and that would make up the 5 that we would see as the most likely targets for this effort. One of the things that we want to present to an airline is what is the true potential of the Knoxville market versus the numbers that you've seen today, because they don't necessarily tell the whole story of what we have currently in our database. So we look at 3 main things. One is the leakage analysis. This is a study that a number of consulting firms in aviation can do. It basically says somebody bought a ticket in Knoxville or live in Knoxville, but they flew out of another airport. They flew out of Nashville, they flew out of Atlanta. That would be a leakage from diverted passengers. The second one would be low-fare market stimulation. There's an accepted percentage that a market will grow just by having a low-fare carrier in the market. And then there's also, as Doug mentioned earlier, the tourism growth factor, and we'll touch on that briefly. On the leakage analysis, they've been done in 2003, 9, and the Airport Authority just had another one completed, and it all showed, in all 3 cases, about 20%, in fact, the most recent one said about 22%, I believe, of our market is going somewhere else to get on an airplane. So if you look at that based on the numbers of passengers for 2012, 20% represents 155,000 passengers that we did not have on aircraft out of here, or about 425 departing passengers per day. With low-fare stimulation, the accepted norm is 15 to 20% growth in the market simply because of low fare. If you'll remember back to the slide that showed Greenville and Charleston, the first year Greenville grew 40%, Charleston grew 26%, and that can happen many times. It's even greater than the 15 to 20%. But being conservative, we use the 15% on the low end, it'd still be another 116,000 passengers for about 318 passengers a day. Then we looked at something that's unique to this area, and that's the huge tourism market that we have. And we all know that probably 98 or 99% of those people come with mom, dad, kids, maybe the cat and dog, and come up to Sevier County and into this region. But they come other than by air. We're taking, if you have a modest increase of 2% of that market, and really generating, not switching people over, although there would be some of that, but more generating new visitors to this area. That would be another 280,000 passengers a year, about 767 additional passengers per day. So you put all that together, and you come up with a daily total of 1,500 additional passengers. So if I'm an airline person looking at Knoxville, and I can verify that there's about 1,500 additional passengers a day, and a 737 seats about 140 to 150 passengers, you're essentially saying that there's a market out there, a latent market, that would probably fill close to 10 aircraft a day, full. So if you take an 80% load factor, it would do even more. So another 500,000 passengers a year for Knoxville would put us right up there behind Charleston. So what does that mean to you as individual companies? Well, what we want to do is an individual company analysis. We'll look at an example in a minute. It also breaks it down with an individual market analysis. Where do your people fly? We have data for Charleston and Greenville fares before and after they got a low-fare carrier. So we can look at market cost comparisons and savings analysis by market and your total savings. And we can even break it down by carrier. If you have preferred agreements and say, well, we use this airline, we can even say, well, this airline's average fare was X, and this airline's average fare was Y. We're able to go deeper into this than we have been in the past. Mitch was kind enough to let us use pilot as an example, and these numbers are somewhat made up, which is kind of use it as a way to show you what we will do when we come in to work with you. Top 10 destinations, hypothetically, in this case, Chicago, and these are a number of our top destinations. So we took Chicago, and we looked at the fares out of Charleston, Greenville, and Knoxville for 2010 and 11 to both O'Hare, Midway, and to Los Angeles. And you can see what those are, but what really happens is when you come to this one, hypothetically, we said 107 passengers, which is a fairly low number. But the average fare paid, these are actual numbers now. So if you had 107, and what was the actual fare paid in Knoxville at $223, the total amount paid was $23,800. You can see the average fare of the low fare drops to $132. The amount with the low fare is $14,000. You save almost $10,000. And a 40% savings in the Chicago market. It's interesting, I'll give you a couple examples of what happens when you get the low-fare carrier as they did at Southwest. Before Southwest went into Greenville-Spartanburg, they got 2,900 passengers a year to Baltimore. Anybody want to take a guess what it was last year? 49,000. 2,900. 49,000. Chicago went from about 11 or 12,000 to 36 or 37,000. It's just a tremendous growth factor, in particularly their nonstop markets. And one question someone asked was, well, did that mean, since that was traffic to Midway Airport in Chicago and not O'Hare, what happened to the airlines flying to O'Hare, American, United, and so on? Actually, they went up a little bit as well. The whole tide raises all the boats. It actually brought the others up as well. And we saw that in the D.C. market with the Baltimore. So the traffic to D.C. increased as well.
Where'd you get the airfare? Was that a legit backup on the slide? Where'd you come up with the 223?
That's what the average was according to DOT out of Knoxville.
I don't believe that. It's not even remotely close.
That's all fares paid by all passengers.
I'm not seeing anything anywhere remotely close to that.
that would be $446.
That's about what it is, Dave, when you book Chicago Direct that year, it's 465 and 488 is what they've been running lately.
That's gotta be within 2 or 3 weeks notice though. That isn't a day or two notice.
That's the average of all fares.
Yeah, well, you're given, anybody that's vetting travel within a business is making sure that their travelers are not booking the day before.
No, but I'm just saying, you know, if you take averages, because, you know, even with a good business that's growing quickly, you know, you can't always plan 2 to 3 weeks, and I'm not seeing anywhere near that.
Well, book my first class.
We all know there's not any first class out of here. It's flying private, so. But I'm not seeing airfare that low. I wish I was. I mean, it'd save us a lot of money. I'm not sure that number.
I think the key point.
You guys verify it, that's fine. I'm not seeing it, that's all.
The key point is the low fare carrier coming in will drop fares.
I know what the punchline is here. I'm just saying I'm not seeing that as a basis, so that's why I'm here. That's good. I mean, go ahead.
The average fare, by the way, in Baltimore was $216 one way before Southwest went into agreement. It's now $104 one way. That's an average. Now that's, again, paid by all people, but at that level, you can see it has an impact on everybody. So how can you help with this co-effort? One is to agree that we meet today, and we'll let it look at your calendars right away or contact me shortly, set up a time to come in and begin to study your travel patterns and like we showed in the highway example, where do your people go, how many go, what are they paying, so we can begin to give you an idea of what type of savings will be available for your company. And we'd like to get onto that as soon as we can and start to study the situation. We do have a confidentiality agreement that can set up by Innovation Valley so that we will sign that with you, that any data that you give us will be kept confidential. The other thing is support the airline. We get an airline or airlines here with a reasonable percentage of traffic. If they're giving us 10% of the seats out of the Knoxville market, 10% of the flights, then we'd like to see 10 or 11% of your business on that airline, so they're getting a proportional share. That way we have the sustainability we talked about earlier. And then financial support of this effort at whatever level your company you can commit. And that would be something we would decide after we do the analysis of what you're paying and what we hope you can save with this program. And we've already got a couple of companies that have agreed to participate. They're very good at supporting us, as Doug mentioned. So those would be the 3 things that we would look at. Doug, you want to talk about where we go from here?
Dave's point is away. We had, I think this helps us to understand how we get more competitive in airfares. When you pull out what DC flies and look at that solely, because we're very much like Huntsville and Charleston in that way, does this lower DC flies?
When I looked at the DC fares, they dropped slightly into DC. But the Dulles and the Baltimore particularly, the bottom fell out for both Greenville and for Charleston. So obviously the majority went with a low fare carrier because of the $104 one-way average fare versus the $216 they had to pay. They were going to go where they were going to save the most money.
So Reagan stays high as the other wrong.
I can't speak for what, say, U.S. Air will do at Reagan. You know, if they see an impact on the traffic going over to Baltimore, then they're going to have to respond to that if they want to get that traffic back. And I think that's what probably happened in Charleston and Greenville. And Washington's the key example for us, as you know.
The real punchline for Pilot Flying J, we committed $75,000 to the initiative, and I'm not saying we won't do more. It pays back for us in financial dollars. If this is successful and this math works, it pays back in 6 months. So it's really a no-brainer to support it. Number 2, there's a huge intangible. Everybody that's got any remote control around travel in their business is monitoring their flyers' cost. And if it's going over $500 in our company, it goes to supervisor approval or manager approval. And generally, I don't approve a flight over $500. They can drive to Nashville or go out of Atlanta. So you think about all the flights that can come back into Knoxville, or the flights that can go out of Knoxville versus your employees traveling to Atlanta or Nashville or wherever. And look at the productivity and the efficiency around it. And that's a huge intangible, but there's an ROI around that. You don't have somebody getting back into Nashville at 9 o'clock at night, spending 3.5 hours in the car. By the time they get to their car and head back this way, lose an hour because you come back in the Eastern time zone. I've done it. It's horrible. And if you think about the benefits, just what that can provide, and I don't think we're asking for a lot. I think our commitment is outer end. Could be wrong, Dave, what you think about commitment should be, but I think we're at the right side of the bookend. I don't think the request of the business community is going to be really, really excessive. And trust me, it will pay back in a very, very short term. If you have a lot of flying activity, it's a quick payback. And the efficiencies and the benefits to your employees are huge. Plus, think about the private travel that your people do outside of business. And they're going to have the advantage. If we get Southwest in here, if we get this off the ground, we're successful, and say we get a Southwest, think about the destinations that Southwest offers that are really a pain in the rear right now to get to out here, and the benefits that can provide just as an intangible to the folks. So, sorry to interrupt there, Dave, but that's really the punchline for how we look at it.
Well, it brings up another point I failed to mention. You saw the slide on the fact that we could grow this market by 500,000 passengers a year. It's also the one that showed the leakage today is a couple 100,000 passengers. Those aren't going to Nashville or Atlanta to get high fares.
Well, people are going to Asheville now.
There's Asheville flight there, Chief, you're right.
A lot of people are going to Asheville for some of the bigger carriers. I mean, they're right now running 15 to 20% cheaper.
Why are they going there?
Cheaper.
Right, so if those people come back here,
Especially people that live, on the east side of Knoxville or East Knox County, Superior County. To them, I mean, it's 20 minutes or further drive.
So these people that we would bring back and stop the leakage would be low fare passengers, dropping the average for Knoxville down from where we are today. So that's another way to look at it. We're not losing the people that are paying high ticket prices. We're losing the people that are getting the low fares, and that's why they leave the market to go elsewhere. But,
So in terms of next steps, we're going to continue our conversations with the surrounding regional public sector, private sector tourism, as I mentioned. But what we really need is to get that appointment on the calendar where Dave can sit down with the right person at your company, be it the travel director, the CFO, controller, whoever that may be, to kind of present the case, the customized case to your particular business. There's no doubt this is a business issue. This is an economic development issue I see all the time when we're trying to recruit new companies to this region. Airfare comes up, and the cost of airfare comes up as one of those impediments, one of those hurdles that we need to address. And so this is a great effort to go forth and try and get that hurdle removed from the conversation. So I think that's the last slide.
Just one other thing I'd like to add. When we tried this before, we didn't have a hard financial commitment from Knox County and Knoxville City. And now they're leading. They are out there, they're saying they're willing to be the seed money to get this fund started. And that's huge. That ought to speak volumes to anybody that's really assessing this, because now the mayors, Mayor Harrell, Mayor Burchett, they're putting their money where their mouth is. They got it in their budgets, they got it approved, and they're ready to go. So now I feel like we'll get other community and metropolitan support, which is a big deal. And it doesn't mean that we'll be unsuccessful. I think it means we'll have great success when we get the region, the electeds around the region to support this, and we get some good, solid business to support this. I think it'll be an impact, and we'll get some attention. And you saw what the domestic product that this region is versus anywhere else. our size that's being successful in drawing attention for some of these carriers, they'll look at this and jump all over it. They'll see some of this math and be all over it.
What's been the commitment by the state? Because if you're losing people to, say, Asheville, North Carolina, or to ATL,
We haven't gone down that path, Dave.
you haven't talked to Haggerty at all.
The state's in an awkward position because they've got Memphis, Nashville,
Yeah.
Knoxville, Chattanooga, Tri-Cities.
Yeah, but still, it's a matter of priorities, in my opinion. And I think it'd be prudent to reach out to Haggerty and talk to him. Because, I mean, there's a lot of money that, they're working through right now. I mean, they're axing 5 different departments, so there's got to be some money reallocated somewhere.
The state has a new $8 million addition to the tourism budget, and we're hoping that a good piece of that will be coming to East Tennessee and become part of this effort, the tourism side. One other thing I mentioned, and Jim, you can back me up on this or refute it. Jim had a number of years at Piedmont, U.S. Air. I was with Delta. And I think we can say that the airlines are not sitting down in their offices saying, gee, we want to look at Knoxville and really break down the economic aspects of Knoxville, the population. Many times when you meet with an airline, they'll say, tell us what we don't know. Are we right about that?
Correct.
Yeah. And so part of what we're trying to do is get everything together to make a very coherent package to present to the airlines and really focus their attention on the fact that, Knoxville may be a lot different than what we think it is when we break it down and really get into it. And I think they'll find that to be true. So timing, I think, is great. Charleston and Greenville provided a change in business model for Southwest. They came into markets that were our size. Other airlines, JetBlue and all, are looking obviously similar sized markets. We want to be part of that. We want Knoxville and this region to be part of that growth. So, any questions that you have other than John?
Why does $3 million seem like the right number?
And you're right. In looking at other cities and what they've done, this is probably a little bit above what they've done, but you're competing with these other cities. So when you go in with your package to the carrier, it has to be strong. We feel that's a realistic goal that we can reach, first of all. And secondly, it's a very, very competitive level.
John, Newport News, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers as it happens. Newport News raised, I think, a $2 million fund. They haven't exhausted it. I think they used $1.25 million or something initially, something like that. And then they've got some reserves to make sure they can have legitimate conversations. So,
Could a company pledge it and commit it without actually getting it until it's needed?
I think to be determined. The governance around all of this has to get created yet. We're looking for some examples of how other regions have done this from a governance perspective in the vetting process. I mean, the first question in my mind, and hopefully I get to participate, is, well, who are we going to assess as worthy of our money? And how are they going to use it? And how are we going to make sure we have a long-term commitment? So we got to make sure we have the right governance and thought process around it. But I think $3 million is a legitimate goal. I think legitimately half of it, to maybe 60%, can come from the public sector. The other 40, 50% can come from the private sector. And that doesn't mean that if we're successful, we don't go back to the well.
I was trying to understand this $4 million, would it be a slam dunk, or is $2 million sort of on the edge? I was curious how you benchmark.
Well, Newport News had a lot of government traffic, a lot of government flyers, so, they probably had a leg up to begin with. I think we're going to need a little more capital behind it to get to it.
Just for comparison, $1 million is sort of the buy-in, and I'm comparing us to what other communities are doing. $1 million is about the minimum. The high end thus far has been $26 million from Panama City for Southwest Airlines, and that's way above what the norm is. But it's not unusual for communities to have $4, $5, $6, $7 million airlines and packages floating around out there. So it's become a pay-to-play game, particularly for low-fare service.
The good news is the stronger your market and the stronger you can demonstrate it, probably the less you need for incentive money. If better have a very high incentive package. If there's strong marketing can show that, it will help. And we think that the 3 million, and if we got 4, that'd be fine. I think 2 would be kind of the minimum we would like to have to move this thing forward. And we're getting, we're in good shape right now at about $1.2 million, and we know some other things that could come in that could push that up to about 1.5 or 1.6. So you're going to be the group that can help us get to that goal. And that's why we want to meet with you, talk with you, and see how we can make this all work for everybody.
So what's the timeline on this, Dave?
I'm going to start making contacts with corporate accounts next week.
I understand that, but I mean, when's the timeline of you guys coming up with 3 million? Is it 6 months, next week, 2 years, what?
I'd say 90-day effort. We'll put the hammer down.
Okay.
And we're not going to talk about it, but, we got a couple of leads there that might mandate that we get the cash flow.
Okay.
And you're 75 commitment in the 1.2 that's already been provided.
Sure, I thought, is it 1.2? Yeah, I guess it is.
I have a question. Are these low-cost airlines going to allow you to transfer your ticket to a different name? And if they do, what's the cost going to be for that, to transfer it?
I'm sorry. I didn't get
Do they allow you to transfer the ticket to a different name? Because if you book 21 days in advance to get the lowest ticket price, sometimes it gets canceled and you may want to transfer that ticket to another person. Are these airlines, do they allow that? If they do, it's the cost more than the ticket.
I don't know.
The transfer fees are anywhere between $150 and $250 per ticket.
Right. I know that with the carriers today,
Yeah, and not all airlines allow you to do that.
is it Southwest that are advertising said we don't charge for,
They don't do the baggage charge. I'm sure they've got the
But
fine print.
we found out about the baggage charge. Their system doesn't allow for baggage charges. They're converting their system, so soon enough we'll have baggage charges.
What's interesting, I'm on the corporate board, and I'm sitting next to a guy that runs an airline in India yesterday. So listen how lucky we are. If you fly in India, and if you want the aisle seat, you pay $50 more. So they're charging for breathing the air on the aircraft, okay? So, and at the end of the day, that's the only way they're going to stay in business. They're going to have to generate fee income, and that's, they're all going to do it, so.
profit margins in the airline industry are about as thin as anybody out there. But
I say in closing, last thing, we do have this information sheet. My contact name is down here at the bottom of this cool-looking airline window. So if you have other folks you think, friends, peers in the private sector you think we need to be talking to, have them reach out to me. We'll get them added to the list. We'd love to start those conversations, like I said, next week. So, do you have any other questions? With that, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
You guys want to spend some time with
Heidi?
We've got all the aircraft.
Oh, you were there, yeah,
Yes.
You got like,
Yeah, it's not specific here, whatever, might be a little bit of a conversation, all the
like hospitals that pay for preachers, then we have funerals at 9 on Thursday, and weddings at 9.
Right.
Not only in Knoxville, but Chicago, Houston. So we help them market their product in external markets. That's a good question.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So do you think we come?
Yeah, let me talk, I mean, I
In
guess.
person, have we talked to somebody?
So it's someone,
It would be different. Yeah, what, ideally, let's say we get there 2 weeks from today, for that appointment, then we travel, gets, your top 10 destinations, where does some investment going to the most? And then he can do that customized analysis to be
you were looking for a destination to be.
Well, she said she has.
where are you going? Where are you traveling to?
We're traveling to where we're bringing people in for recruiting.
And then, if we think we're successful, then we can.
Well, I said, like, if you want, we can go ahead and just try. Okay, wait, tell me what you want me to say.
It breaks it down. Basically. That equates to this much savings to your company going forward. So it gives you an ROI to chew on. Okay? Thanks, Kathy.
Just working at Knoxville with love.
Dave, Southwest Airline. Did you contact me? You guys, you have my contact info? Sure, yeah. You're an RO, right?
Well,
Sure.
So basically,
we're kind of joking around, but they are extremely
It could be silly.
Bishop speaking. Yeah, if you want to, you can just send whoever that person is, and I'll get content stuff. It's going to be him making most of these. But he's,
one more question.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
The 300,000, they talked about how the governing process